Hello, everyone. It's good to be back, and today we're going to be looking at the cost of climate change. That's where we left off after weather extremes. We're going to discuss, and I want to say I might end up re-recording some of the other parts because I got a new mic recently. You can probably hear it; it's way better, and we have the mic. The lighting's good. Um, yeah, so let's continue where we left off. So, first, is that losses or the costs of climate change are going to include both labor and capital. Labor is anything that the human average person works for, like the amount of hours you put into a job, working at a job, that's labor. Capital is the earnings from the job that impacts both you and the firm that you work for. So the firms take your labor and uh, they profit off of it, but in return, they pay you to do that labor. So that's kind of the labor cycle, at least in most societies, specifically capitalistic societies. But other societies do it as well, and that's kind of how the circle goes. You can ask any economist. That's kind of how it works: is you work for a job, for a service, they profit off of your service, your labor, but in turn, you get paid to do that service. So you get money, they get money, everyone's happy, and life goes on. The problem with climate change is it's going to disrupt that a little bit by many new weather, extreme weather factors impacts. And this includes extreme heat and drought, specifically, become more frequent, more common, and it will limit the capabilities of workers across the globe, up to millions, if not billions, of people to work in the summers. It'll just be too unbearably hot to work. I think the capability of humans is like over 112 degrees. You can't like work physically outdoors. You risk a stroke, and there just won't be enough water for people either. I don't talk about it too much in this presentation, but we're running out of water and we're having more heat and drought. So eventually, yeah, you're gonna have problems. With more heat, you need more water, and with more heat, there's less water. So that's a big problem. Farmers, of course, will struggle to grow more crops because, as I said before, the drought and the heat. Plants don't like that. You need more water. Where's the water coming from? You have a drought, right? Uh, Also, another problem is you realize there's going to be population growth still, and most estimates have the population to continue to grow to reach about 10 billion by 2050. That's not good. So you have more people, more drought, less water. So you have more people and less water available to them, and it's hotter, so they need more water per person, and so everyone and everything is going to need water, and with a worsening drought and greater population, it's a setup for disaster. Really, this is why we're starting to call it climate crisis now instead of climate change. I just saw recently my university's calling it a climate crisis now because it is a crisis. The politicians are saying it, like everybody's saying it, because it is a serious, serious issue, and I wish more politicians would take it seriously. One of the first recordings of this presentation were made under the before the election. Uh, and no matter what you believe or who you voted for or why, I just want people to know that Trump wants to bring back coal and oil, and he wants to kind of get roll back all of these environmental regulations, and just kind of says forget renewables, which is a huge, huge problem if you want to tackle this crisis. And it's getting serious and worse as the days go on, and we can't really afford 4 more years of inaction. We just can't, especially by like the largest polluter in the world, to just continue to do what they've been doing the past 100 years or more. It's very dangerous. That's what kind of has me concerned about the Trump administration. Is what are they going to do when it comes to climate change? The answer is nothing, but it will have lasting impacts, and that's what concerns me the most. And I was going to mention this guy over here. So you see him. Let me get the laser pointer. He's sweating here, right? This is what's going to happen. You're going to see a lot of people sweating outside during these extreme heat, right? You're like, so what? He's sweating. Everybody sweats. Well, the problem with that is he's losing water. When you sweat, you lose water. And that's a big thing. Everything loses water, plants, everything. So we're gonna just continue to lose water with this extreme heat, and with more people, it's just gonna become an increasingly difficult problem, as I've mentioned already. Um, and also, a lot of places you won't even see people like this. They'll just be on the floor. They won't even be sweating because they can't sweat because it will be too hot for them to even sweat. Um, there's some areas where if you reach a certain wet bulb, it's like 86, 90-degree wet bulb. So somewhere in the upper 80s, I think it is. And once you rate a wet bulb of that high, it's like not livable because the wet bulb kind of tells you what temperature you can cool yourself up to by sweating. And yeah, if you can't, if it's like 90-degree wet bulb, it's just not really livable. And a lot of places have actually reached that threshold. I think parts of like Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Sea area in the Middle East, have actually met those thresholds, and it's scary to see. Middle East is a dangerous place, and not just for weather, other reasons too. But we're gonna focus on the climate here. And also, not only extreme heat, but there'll also be more flooding events. Ironic, right? We just talked about droughts, but there'll also be more floods from hurricanes, severe thunderstorms, and other severe weather that can lead to catastrophic damage to life and property. So let's take the pointer. Okay, so this is the thing about climate change. I think I've already said it before. You have more weather extremes. It's not that you don't it's not that you have more rain or you have more drought or that the temperature increases by 2 degrees C. It's that you have a longer heat waves that average out. So you'll have like a bunch of average weather days, and then you'll have a long heat wave. Because there's evidence as well that climate change will lead to longer heat waves, which we've seen in California, right? I live in California. I'm seeing it firsthand. I have really long heat waves now. Let's see, climate change. Oh yeah, and then hurricanes, right? This is great timing to make this video because of kind of what happened in Florida recently, and in the Philippines with all these typhoons coming over there. So and the waters have been really warm, and hurricanes really rely on that warm weather. Same thing with severe thunderstorms. It causes greater instability, greater levels of water vapor in the atmosphere through evaporation. So you have a more water dense, water heavy atmosphere, and it kind of allows for greater instability and more weather. And I was going to mention that climate change reform is an investment, not an expenditure, because it's an investment for the future. It's not an expenditure. We're spending now, but it's an investment for the future. And you know what? We do that all the time. That's what we do when we put money into Social Security, or we put money into an IRA or a 401k. That's an investment. And that's kind of what we're doing with climate change. It's same idea. All right, now we're talking about the discount rate. Why the discount rate? Why do I mention it? Because it's an investment tool you can use when it comes to putting money into climate change. So I think the Biden administration put like 200 billion or so dollars per. It was like maybe it was 450, but that was for like several years, right? He put like a few hundred billion for like 4 years, like 100 billion a year, right? That's great. That's a lot of money, but it's not enough for kind of. And I'm gonna tell you why I don't think it's enough. So the discount rate tells you how the value of money changes over time. This includes the inflation rate as well as overall well-being. So it includes inflation and how well off you think the future will be, how people will be in the future, how well off. Um, yeah, kind of like how we're better off than we were compared to our parents and grandparents. Right, the discount rate is positive, net upward. Um, it's often used by economists, politicians, and investors when it comes to implementing climate reform. It's also not just used for climate reform. It's also used for just economists and just about anything. The typical discount rate is projected to be about between 1 and 4%, and 2 and anywhere from 2 to 3% is kind of the best guess discount rate, which is also about the average inflation rate, funny enough, except recently, right? It did go up a little bit. Forbes and AP they both reported a study that the global economy will pay about $38 trillion from climate change alone. And no, that is not in Zimbabwe dollars. That's American dollars, 38 trillion. That the US budget is like 1/10 that. Maybe not 1/10, but it's much, much smaller than 38 trillion. And it's going to cost the global economy 38 trillion. That's a lot. That's like I said, that's way more than the GDP of America, the United States. And then in 2023, I don't have the report up here, but the CNN reported that the U.S. is already paying 150 billion a year in climate-related damages. Already 150 billion, the U.S. per year, just in damages. So now you think how much the Inflation Reduction Act is putting money in. It's not as good as we initially thought. Also, U.S. All right, so I did some calculations, right? The U.S. accounts for about 4% of the world's population, and assuming even distribution of climate damage around the world, which isn't true, it's not even. The U.S. actually gets kind of a big part of it because we have such varying climates across the whole entire population. But in other words, this 38 trillion, as a proportion of population for the U.S., assuming equivalent destruction, right, across the globe, cost the U.S. about 1.5 trillion a year, and that's tenfold the current cost. So in just 30 years, 2049, not even 25 years, we'll be spending 10 times the amount that we currently are on climate change. That is a big deal. All right. And so I did some calculations for you. With a discount rate of 2%, the US could invest as much as $770 billion a year on climate reform and break even on its investment. So for 25 years, the next 25 years, if you invested that much money on climate reform, you would break even on your investment. With a discount rate of 3%, the US can invest as much as $575 billion a year. So with this knowledge, and that's with 3%, right? So I said my conclusion was with this information, the U.S. could easily allocate at least $500 billion a year in funds to help fight the fight in climate change. But of course, politicians don't listen to that at all. They think 100 billion is too much, when we could be doing 7 times that and still break even on our investment. I think 500 is a good case. It's 75 billion lower than the higher end of the discount rate that's proposed. I did the math. I don't show my calculations, but I think 500 billion at least is a good point. I think we can easily argue for 500 billion a year in climate change reform in the United States. But I don't expect it to get done now, seeing that the Republicans control the entire legislature, the judicial, the executive. But what do you know? Maybe they'll change their minds when they see their losing profits due to it. I don't know. Maybe there'll be magic. So we learned about the discount rate. Now we're going to talk about other solutions to climate change, not just reductions in emissions. We're going to talk about. Oh, sorry, we are going to talk about reductions in emissions. We're going to talk about solutions in general, which do include reductions in emissions, but we obviously still want to use energy, right? We don't want to just say, we don't need fossil fuels because that kill the economy, the way of life for millions, if not billions of people. So, well, what do you do about that? We still have high energy demands. How do we meet those energy demands? Well, we switch to renewables, and some renewables are easier to switch for other places more than others. So we have multiple types of renewables we can switch to. This includes solar power, wind power, hydropower, geothermal, tidal power, and I put this last one as a question mark. Fusion, because we haven't actually got to fusion yet. I said it's a possible future of energy, like nuclear, but without the byproduct and it's also the same process the sun undergoes to create energy, right? That's so we'd essentially be making our own little suns around Earth, which would be incredible. Like the sun makes up so much energy. Like we are alive on this planet because of the sun. So just imagine if we could make our own little suns on Earth. That'd be incredible. Now, obviously, I think personally that fusion power is possible because how is the sun exerting all that energy? It's right because when you're talking about energy, right, creating energy to use, you want to create more than it costs, essentially, and your reaction. And it seems like I don't know if the sun does that or not, but it releases a lot of energy and it stays hot. So certainly something scientists are looking at, and I think it's certainly possible. We just have to learn how it's done. The sun can do it; it can be done. It's done in nature. We just have to learn how to do it. Essentially, it just has to be learned, and hopefully it's safe. Who knows? Suns do explode if they do it too much, so you got to be careful with it. I still think it's safer than fission, though. So, anyways, then there's geoengineering, which is the other type of solution. This isn't this. Scientists don't really like this one, even though it's not popular. And the reason is because geoengineering is kind of the thing that caused climate change in the first place. Was our own inventions. There was this one famous guy that kind of caused so many problems, including like he killed so many people with like aerosols and chemicals. I can't remember his name, but he also caused a lot of the climate change issue we're seeing right now. He died by his own invention too. Anyways, geoengineering ideas are currently under development, and some of these are kind of well known, especially the first two. Cloud seeding, which is the diagram on the right. Cloud brightening, and this one's ridiculous. I said the most preposterous of them all, putting giant mirrors in space to reflect sunlight. And yes, that's an actual idea people are thinking of doing, but it's crazy, right? Who would like, let's put 100 kilometer by 100 kilometer mirrors in space? Like, who thinks of that? But that's how is that even possible? I do not know. How do you even get mirrors that big? It's just crazy. Um, okay, so cloud seeding and brightening are used to increase the albedo of Earth by release of aerosols to cool Earth. Now that's actually more. I wrote that, but it's actually more of what cloud brightening is. So well, for cloud brightening, they release a type of particle into clouds that makes them brighter. Because if you have more aerosols in a cloud, it actually tends to brighten them so they reflect more sunlight. And that is one reason why aerosols actually cool the planet. They cause more reflection. They reflect more sunlight. So if we put more of a environmentally safe aerosol into the atmosphere that would reflect more sunlight or brighten these clouds to cause them to reflect more sunlight, like sea salt particles, that could help increase the albedo of Earth and cool the planet. I think that cloud brightening could work. I think cloud seeding could work. Cloud seeding, though, that just like I said, that just causes more aerosols. It causes condensation in the atmosphere. You're releasing these particles into the air, and you're causing it to to uh, con- to make contact with water molecules in the air, and they're supposed to. And when they come in contact with the water molecules, it's supposed to condense and form a cloud, and it can cause it to rain, as we see on the right. That's what cloud seeding is. It's really to make clouds and to cause rain, and that it's been a cause of a lot of conspiracies. But we can't do it in the large scale. We can only do it in the local micro scale currently because we just don't have the power and the energy to perturb the system that much. Because the Earth is a very, very powerful system that operates on the order of uh, terawatts of energy. We're talking like more. A hurricane produces more energy in a day than the entire world does in like 5 days. It's incredibly powerful. The Earth system is just so incredibly powerful. We don't have the energy capabilities to perturb it yet. Of course, maybe 120 years from now or so, maybe in 2300, maybe, I don't know, but not not anywhere in the near future. I'll say that. Um, but yeah, I think cloud brightening is not a bad idea. The problem with it is that you have to continually go out there with planes like on here, right? You have to continue to go out there with planes and eject this material constantly. And as we continue emitting, we're going to have to do more and more of this climate geoengineering mitigation stuff to continue to meet the demands of our emissions. So you keep emitting CO2, you're going to keep warming, keep warming, keep warming. But to mitigate that warming, you had to put out more and more sea salt particles, or more and more whatever, right? More and more of these aerosols that, and eventually, like, you're going to be flying out thousands of planes a year of dropping all these chemicals in the air. And I saw that it costs up to billions of dollars every year after like 20 years. So it's not economically feasible. It's not feasible at all, because flying these planes also pollutes the environment more. It causes more climate change. So then you have to put more planes out there, and it's just a feedback loop. And it costs more money. And then, of course, there's going to be conspiracies like, what are they doing with these planes? They said they're just dropping salt out of the air, but it's actually chemicals. They're going to make you infertile or something. People will say something like that. They'll make some conspiracy up, as if there already isn't those already. But there was a lot of suspicions around it. And while it could work in the short term, I'm actually not against cloud brightening in the short term. I think that it can be done to mitigate problems we have currently, because currently something should be done to slow climate change. I think it works well in tandem with the solutions. Like if we're too slow to respond to climate change, like if we're too slow to get those renewables like solar, wind, hydro out there, I think it's a good band-aid for us in the short term. Like it's kind of putting a band-aid over the problem. And you know what? It works for some cuts in the short term. You just put a band-aid on something, like, okay, we'll get some I'll go to the doctor later, just put a band-aid on it. I'll be fine for now, you know? You break your leg and you're like, I'll finish the football game. Like when Matthew Stafford ruptured his shoulder, dislocated his shoulder, he still finished the game. And then he went to get the surgical help or whatever. Then he went to the doctor. That's kind of the situation I think we're doing here. Uh, Finish it out by putting a band-aid. And that's all it should be used for. It should not be used as a solution, though. It should be worked in tandem with, not as a solution, individual solution. I already talked a little bit about some of these green energy solutions. The second largest up and coming, I say up and coming, but it's already here, form of energy is wind power. It's been around for a while. It's nothing really too new or fancy. Windmills have been around for a long time. What they use is mechanical energy from the wind, or actually, sorry, yes, they use mechanical energy from wind, and they turn it into power that we can generate, we can use. The wind's blowing, right? It's energy. It's moving. It's just fresh energy that you can just collect. And that's kind of what they do. And if you place these, I guess contraptions, it's a funny word. In case you have high wind, with high winds, imperatives, affecting the windmills exponentially to the fourth power. Yes, however, winds too high can cause damage to the windmill. Tropical storms, tornadoes, and other high wind events. Windmills are commonly placed in or near mountain areas because the terrain allows for windier conditions. Now, this is true. Now, I didn't mention this, but more research I've done. Windmills like consistent wind, breezy but not too breezy. Once you pass about 30 miles per hour wind, you kind of stagnate. Like you don't really, after 50 miles an hour, you kind of stop generating power altogether. So you want wind about 25 is kind of the Goldilocks mile per hour range for windmills. 25 miles an hour. That's pretty gusty. You don't just get that on average, right? If you're just standing outside, you're probably getting 5 miles an hour. That's not good for a windmill. You're not really getting any energy at all. You need like at least five. You need at least like 8 miles an hour. 8 to 25 is kind of where you get most of your energy. I'll say 8 to 30 because you can still get energy at 30. So you need at least that much wind. If you don't have that, you're not getting any energy. So we want to put these. And I don't know what the preferred aspect is on a mountain for windmills. I don't know exactly, but you do want to put them in favorable conditions around mountains on by the coast where there's more wind from the land sea breeze. Those are kind of ideal spots for them, and it's the West Coast has all these mountains and obviously the coast. So I think the West Coast is very ideal for windmills. I think you can put them just about anywhere. I think the West Coast of the United States can be 100% green renewables by like 15 years from now, 10 years from now, even maybe 10, 2030, not 2030, 2035. I think we can. The whole West Coast could if they wanted to, because there's already some wind power, especially in California. Solar. I mean, look, the West Coast is always sunny. There's always sunlight. There's always wind because of the mountains. So it should be a no-brainer. We should switch to this stuff. Anyway, the number one, solar, right? I've been talking about it already. That's the number one largest green power source is solar, and it's still growing fast. It's also the fastest growing. It's like this going exponential growth. You know why it's exponential growth? Well, the big reason is because of money. I didn't mention it here either. But the cost of solar has gone down substantially. Solar is actually like the cheapest method of energy at this day and age. It's pretty cheap. Uh, Solar alone is powerful enough to power some states such as Arizona and Nevada because they're pretty. I wrote that down. That's because they don't have as much of an energy demand, and they're also sunny all the dang time, right? Because there's not as many people there, and it's always sunny. It's always sunny in Arizona. That's what they should make that show called, right? Anyway, so I made some math calculations. I'm not going to get into it all because it's just a lot. Where's my cursor? Oh, I accidentally put the pen on. That's not good. Oh well. Okay, whatever. So if we say the average, blah blah blah, Yuma and Phoenix. Okay. So then we said so there's 300 sunny days per year, and I don't know what this is. This is equal to this, and then this is the solar output I got based on this latitude. Yeah, because this 1360 is the solar output of the sun, and then this is what the solar output is at 35 latitude, which is right around where Phoenix is. And um, so then with this math, you find that this is about how much energy you get per day 914 watts per meter squared. The average American uses 10,000 watts per day. So if we assume the sun is up for an average of 12 hours a day, which it obviously in the summer you get it more, winter you get it more, but on average it's 50-50 on average, right? So that means the average solar output throughout the day is almost 500 watts per meter squared. And if we do some math, we find that it takes about 22 meters squared of solar panels at 100% efficiency to reach this output. This means that solar can power the typical American home. That's good because the typical American home is much larger than 22 meters squared. Especially the area on top of your roof is much greater than that, so you can fit enough solar panels on your roof to power it. That's it. Your entire home can be powered from solar, and a lot of people do that. That use just solar power, just solar. And let's say that's the average American. What if you use 8,000 watts or 7,000 watts? Easily, right? And that's just no extra cost to you. You just have to pay for it to put them up there, and then you're just getting free energy from the sun. It's incredible. For it's just energy sitting there that we're just waiting to harvest. It's also Elon Musk's favorite form of energy. I'm not a big fan of Elon Musk anymore because of reasons, but he was going with something. He had something in mind when he said that solar. Why don't we just take it? It's sitting there. It's free energy. I don't understand why anyone could be an opponent of solar. It's the best, hands down, free energy. Anyway, and also with the price of making them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, like why would you say no to solar? It's cheaper, and yeah, and you can use it anywhere. It's pretty, right? Yeah, like I said, it won't be the sun is going to be here forever, so it's infinitely renewable essentially. And if we somehow make it that long to when the sun dies, we probably have other things to worry about by then. Then there's also hydroelectric, which is just dams, right? We have one over here. Let me put back my circle laser pointer. All right, here's a dam. This is the Hoover Dam, I believe. Um, so it's currently the most widely adopted form of energy. And I asked my professor, well, why don't we don't talk about hydro much? Why don't we? And the reason is because the uh, growth has slowed because expansion's difficult. We've already built so many dams. Most dams that can be built have already been built. So there's not a lot of room for growth for hydro, but it still makes up a large portion of our energy, and it's important. Unfortunately, here's a big thing: is that here I actually wrote it here. Climate change is drying out many of these dams and rivers, and is even reducing the energy output from the Sea Lake Mead, which is right here. And that is a problem. This is before the drought, obviously, because actually maybe it is during the drought because I can see the lines. But the big thing is during a drought, the dam relies on water. And if you have less water, you can't produce as much energy. So during the most recent drought, the water level was 50% below normal for Lake Mead, and the total output was like 25% lower than normal or something. And it's probably exponential, right? Logarithmic decay. So if you decrease another 50%, it'll probably be more than 25% drop in power. So yeah, that's yep, that's why drought's bad. If we put more of these hydropower things, that we'll have less to worry about. The more renewables we use, the easier it is to keep them going. Anyway, geothermal, the last one. Below the bottom right is an example of a geothermal power plant. I'm not going to get into it all, but there it is if you want to look at it. Uh, it uses uh, energy from underground, and common sources include hot water from geysers, of course, because geothermal just really comes from the heat underground. Heat from underground used to power stuff, basically, because there's hot spots underground, especially near, like I said, geysers, volcanoes, anything with a lot of magmatic, is that a word, activity, anything anything that can cause the ground to be hot, which of course it's limited where that can be, but yeah. Another form of green energy is, okay, this is interesting, is people have been talking about composting, that you can burn your compost for energy. Uh, it's like I said, you can do this, but it releases large amounts of greenhouse gases, especially methane, when you burn compost. But the argument of this literal trash burning is that um, it's still gonna burn meth. It's still gonna release methane, even if it sits in a landfill anyway. So whether you burn it or not, it's still gonna release a methane and CO2. Or I don't know if it burns CO2 or not, but definitely methane. So it's like, you might as well use it, right? That's kind of the idea of compost. All right, nuclear. I don't So this is the most controversial form of, I said, alternative energy because it's not renewable. It's a non-renewable form of energy. That's why I don't like it. It's the only one I talk about that's non-renewable, right? All the other sources so far have been non-renewable. So nuclear adopted in the 1950s after the success of the nuclear bomb in World War II. It seemed like nuclear would be the future of energy. The problem? Well, the sources of nuclear, plutonium and uranium, plutonium, sorry, are extremely radioactive and carcinogenic. Both of these compounds are, I should say, radioactive, right? You're gonna get radiation sickness or cancer, of course. Anyway, both these compounds have lifetimes of billions of years, billions. So like as long as the sun has left, right? Basically forever, forever. So if they were to make their way into water supplies, it could spell danger for much of the future of mankind. Sounds scary? It should be. We also don't know what the long-term impacts are of getting like uranium into water supplies and stuff. We don't know the long-term impacts because we've only been learning about it for the past 1950s, right? We don't know have a long history. There hasn't been enough scientific research into the long-term impacts of this nuclear stuff. We don't actually know what will happen in the long term still. We just know that the lifetime is really long. And so, yeah, could be dangerous, dangerous. Anyway, and then I gave an example of Chernobyl, of course, having above safe levels of nuclear radiation still, and other issues, storage. Of course, storage, like where you're gonna store it. They talk about it, but is it just gonna sit there forever? Of course, there's been numerous nuclear meltdowns, Chernobyl, 3 Mile, and Fukushima, and people say, "Oh, it only happened a couple of times." Well, yeah, but eventually, if you keep expand, the likelihood of having another disaster increases with the increased number of these plants. So one of them's going to happen again eventually, and then you'll have another disaster on your hands, which nobody wants that. But the Navy loves it, and France loves it. They're mostly powered by nuclear, which is not bad. It's a very, very powerful fuel. Nuclear, it does have the power to capability to power entire nations, because it just a little bit of uranium will like power so much power, right? Because it's such a compact form of energy. But it's the costliest of all fuel sources, and it's also difficult to find and mine. It's not renewable. Uh, there are also, however, there's similar, more abundant and cheap alternatives. There's salt reactors that people have been looking at. They're much less efficient, but they're cheaper than these nuclear fission reactors, and they don't have the byproduct. So that's something people have been looking at recently is these salt reactors. But yeah, nuclear is a controversial one that I'm actually not behind because I think that mankind can be live fine with the 6 or 7 other actual renewable energy sources, and especially with nuclear, there's not enough uranium to power the whole world. We'd run out of nuclear before we'd run out of fossil fuels if we kept burning it. There's just not a lot there, and it's also hard to find uranium. Like eventually, it's gonna cost so much money. It's just so expensive. I don't understand the appeal to nuclear personally. I never have. Um, anyway, nuclear has a much more favorable cousin, and that's fusion. But how is it different from nuclear? I talked about it before. It's the same thing. It's the opposite. Instead of fission, it breaks up a molecule. Fusion snaps 2 atoms coming together, fusing instead of breaking apart. It's fusing. And so since they're fusing, nothing gets released, right? If you're breaking an atom up, like uh see, I have this remote. It's going to come in and break this atom up. Bomb. Right, that's going to break up. But this remote has to go somewhere. It's a the remote is like a byproduct, or when you do fission, the two molecules atoms, I should say, of uranium, when they split up from fission, they they release a byproduct of radiation because I forget the name of it, but they split up into two smaller atoms. But because the smaller atoms require less neutrons to be stable, it kind of has this release of this byproduct in the power of fission. When the atoms break up, they release this byproduct. But when fusion is atoms fusing together to create a new atom, to create a new element. These atoms are fusing together to form something new. They don't release something. It's just two atoms make something new, just like on the sun. Hydrogen, hydrogen, helium. That's it. You don't have anything else get released in that process. You just make a new element. It's pretty cool. I think that's the whole idea of alchemy, but it's not. Alchemy is just fantasy, right? Anyway, uh, you can read a lot of this. I'm kind of crunched for time. I'm getting tired of talking already. It's been so long. Um, yes. Oh yeah, fusion is very expensive and very energy intensive. So we're not even really close to getting a fusion reactor. However, there's some optimism. In late 2021, scientists were able to make the first nuclear reactor that created more energy than it consumed. So we made great, tremendous progress, and hopefully we can keep funding it. Yeah, Trump. Yeah, you better not get rid of our funding for that because that's some big stuff. That's huge if we could get to doing that kind of energy. I don't think it'll happen before 2050, probably. I want it to happen in my lifetime. I really, really, really want it to happen in my lifetime. If we can get fusion in my lifetime, that would be huge. That'd be huge, as Trump would say. Anyways, so there's other research energy alternatives. I mentioned tidal before. It's not really widely adopted yet at all. Uh, it's because of the cost and minimal location ability. Oh, and plus the potential impacts on ecosystems. So on the bottom right, I have it here, tidal power. So this is just like tides from the ocean, right? When the waves crash on the beach, that creates a lot of energy. Tides create energy, right? And so we want to harvest that energy because the tides are always going, right? And that tides will always be there as long as the moon is around, which, well, at least a couple billion years, I would say. So that's not really much of a concern either. That's a renewable energy source. Tides are almost always going to be there. The moon is slowly moving away from us, but that's an issue for billions of years from now, if not hundreds of millions of years from now. Not anywhere in the near future. So easily adoptable tidal, but it could impact like uh, sea animals that live near the surface, near the near the ocean floor, right? Shallow depths. So there's not really a whole lot of ocean life there, but it could disrupt it slightly. They still don't know the ecological impacts of that, but I'm all for it. Why not? Of course, it can only be done by some coasts, and it can't be a busy coast. It's limited options. So yeah, and I think it's not good as an independent source of energy. I think it's good, as I said earlier, to work in tandem with something else. Yeah, and then there's also superconductors over here. Now they're not really any individual solution. They're just can help power things essentially, like batteries. Trying to use superconductors for batteries, superconductors for just creating energy. But you have to store that energy, just like for solar. But if you could power things with using superconductors or creating electricity through superconductors, it could be say look at this floating magnet. It's pretty awesome, right? So it'd be a very powerful thing to use superconductors in the future, and of course those are just like yeah. I think I read over here. Amount of electricity without any loss to or it would sorry. They have the opportunity to produce an immense amount of electricity without any loss or resistance. It would exponentiate the effective output of modern electricity. Well, there you go. Alrighty. Now, Why green energy is the future? Well, why? Well, this is the adoption graphs I wanted to show you from earlier. So this is photovoltaics, which is solar power. Look at the exponential growth here. And look, here's the cost. Remember, I was talking about the cost. I'm so glad we can finally see it. All right, look at the cost. Look how much cheaper it is now. Look how cheap it is. And I think it says fossil fuel cost is in the gray, so it's right around the same as fossil fuels, if not cheaper. And look, wind is cheaper too. Look, 150, 0. This is cheaper than the solar. It's cheaper. I think. Look at that. Actually, it's about the same as solar. Look how cheap they are. This is fossil fuels, right? So it's like cheaper, if not the same as the fossil fuels. And just look at the price, right? And look at the adoption, especially for solar. Look at that. It's incredible. And then wind too. And then here's EVs. Wow, look at that. The usage of EVs. Look how cheap they've gotten too. It's incredible. And they're still decreasing, right? EVs are still getting cheaper. And the Inflation Reduction Act actually added incentives to buy uh, EVs or ZEVs, zero emission vehicles. Um, there's incentives where you get like thousands of dollars in incentives just to buy an electric vehicle these days. And I think in the long term, if you're going to own a vehicle for like 10 years, it's going to save you money in the long term and the planet. So I don't think there's any reason you shouldn't buy EVs, but that's my argument. And of course, we'll see more of that. I have another slide on EVs later on. All right. So green energy is becoming cheaper. We saw that, and it's becoming more heavily adopted. Investing in electric cars, solar panels can save you money in the long run. Investing in renewable energy reduce the impact of climate change would save billions of dollars annually to worldwide economies, as we said earlier about our discount rate. Labor and capital. Renewable energy will not be depleted. Is as I said, essentially a cheat code in energy. Is the future of the global economy, and better to get ahead than fall behind. In the U.S., we always want to be ahead, but we seem to be falling behind in a lot of aspects. So, you know, the heck with it. But you know, we're catching up, and actually, no, we're not catching up. What am I saying? But this is the future of the global economy. This is what China's doing. This is what Europe's doing. This is what all the developed nations are doing. They're adopting EVs. They're adopting solar panels. They're adopting wind. They're adopting, I guess, nuclear maybe. So, hydro. All of these renewables. They're focusing on a mostly renewable society. Not the United States, not where we're falling. We're lagging behind in it. But, still, these graphs show we're still catching up, right? Although, yeah, you look at the actual percentage 3%, 6%, and then a measly 1%. So we still got room to grow. All right, now we're going to talk about policies that can impact climate change, not just personal decisions or even we're talking about actual policies in the government, which I think are a pretty big deal. So the government may step in and allow incentives to reduce carbon emissions if alternative fuels are not attractive enough. And we talked about this with the Inflation Reduction Act, but this is more than Inflation Reduction Act, right? But a carbon tax is a set tax on each gigaton of carbon emitted by a power plant. The plant must pay a tax on each additional gigaton of carbon over a set limit. The amount of tax may vary by amount of emissions and can change at any way the government chooses. A concern with this method is that it is believed the cost may be passed on to consumers, kind of like a tariff. If carbon costs go up by a tax, does this mean fuel costs will go up? Will gas go up? Will food and good prices go up because of increased transportation costs? Right, when gas goes up, and this is a legitimate voice of concern from economists. Um, right, if you're gonna increase the cost of carbon, it's gonna drive up fuel prices, right? Access to fossil fuels. And that begs the question: will it be passed on to consumers? And the question is likely, right? Because with the society we're in, it's just kind of like imposing an internal tariff is kind of like what it is. That's really kind of what this carbon tax is. It's a lot like that tariff thing, which is unfortunate, right? Because it's really unfortunate, but that's kind of the reality. And it's a lot of concerns from economists is does carbon tax do carbon taxes actually get these uh, big oil to stop producing? No, they just usually will just pass it on to consumers. Well, not if we eliminate them and move to renewables. Anyway, there is not a second alternative to carbon taxes that's slightly better for the consumer, and that's cap and trade. So cap and trade caps the amount of um, uh, it caps the amount of emissions that a plant can do. So they have to buy carbon credits. So you are not allowed to emit. Sorry, the cap is you're capped to emit this much, but you can trade, i.e., buy carbon credits to trade off your emissions, or you can trade them with other. You can trade them with other people. Like, I'll take your carbon credits so I can emit more. Right? That's kind of what it is. So they can buy more carbon credits, and um, and that can help offset emissions, right? And well, you can actually personally buy your own carbon credit, your own person. It's like $50, and you can offset emissions of a power plant. You can buy your own carbon credits. I know Taylor Swift does this to offset her jet usage, and jets and planes are by far the worst polluters, so that's kind of important, but she doesn't really do enough to offset her global warming. And of course, a lot of people ask how effective is this cap and trade system? Buying and trading these carbon credits, is it really that useful? The question is somewhat. The answer is somewhat. Um, yeah. Uh, I don't actually know. You could ask an economist. This is more of an economist question, but um, it it's kind of a similar situation to the carbon tax, but I know they do this cap and trade and carbon taxes a lot in Canada, and it's also made uh what's that Trudeau? It's made Trudeau really unpopular. So politics, the political divide among climate change has widened substantially in the last 20 years. And that's a reason, right? What I just did, a hand movement might have been familiar to you. Who does that? That's a political thing. Increase has been global, but of course it's been mostly notable in the United States. And it was far long before Trump that this became a controversial thing, right? Because look, in 2015, look how big the gap was even then, right? The gap actually hasn't changed much since Trump got elected 2016. It was 38-85. So really, the gap hasn't. I mean, it's 32-88, so the gap has increased, but it was always there. And of course, Trump has divided America and the world, especially America, more than ever. And we can see that, right? The gap widened by almost 10 points after he was elected between Republicans and Democrats. So Democrats actually haven't grown that much, right? Like they went from 68 to 80. That's a growth of 20. And actually, sorry, it's an equal thing. So Democrats went from believing that global warming is this is just caused from human anthropogenic emissions. It went from 68 to 80. So that's an increase of 20. Republicans decreased by 20, so they're kind of splitting off in opposite directions. But Democrats always kind of believed it was a thing. Now they're just more firm about it because the science. But now I don't know what Republicans are cooking to be moving the opposite direction when there's more evidence than before. But, you know, okay. Oh yeah, and I said this is crucial because the United States contributed the most of every country in the world when it comes to global warming. China recently surpassed us, but in the thick of it, since the Industrial Revolution, we've emitted more. The Biden administration made the largest contribution. We talked about the Inflation Reduction Act a little bit. Now the Montreal Protocol. So between the Inflation Reduction Act and the Montreal Protocol, these are two things that help, and of course other pacts that have been made, like the Paris Climate Accord in 2015, and the yearly COP meetings, and what was the other one? The IPCC reports that are made. Like we've gone a long way when it comes to climate change. We do a lot. There's so much scientific research in it, so much money behind it. So I do feel confident that we have the tools needed to make a difference and to put an end to this crisis. Right? There's even Bill Nye. They even got Bill Nye saying swear words about this. That's how you know it's serious. The world's on fire. You know. Anyways, so the Montreal Protocol was a global treaty signed in 1987, and it was made to ban the usage of CFCs, and those are a very potent greenhouse gas. Now you might be thinking, is that why we banned it? To help against climate change? No, of course that's not why we banned it, because it was an environmental thing. You see this giant purple thing in the middle of Antarctica? That isn't from CFCs, that's a hole. We call it the ozone hole because it's like a hole, right? It's just like there's nothing there. Um, so this is basically telling you how much ozone is in the area. There's like no ozone over there. So what's that mean? So ozone is a greenhouse gas. So what? We don't want that, right? No, that's bad because you know what ozone does? Stratospheric ozone, good. Tropospheric ozone, bad. Tropospheric ozone is a uh, it's a pollutant that impacts the lungs. I should say here, not here, and it makes it difficult for you to breathe because it's a pollutant. You don't want to breathe in ozone. Bad. Um, it also contributes to global climate change, global warming. It is why that's what actually keeps us warm. It's like a blanket. Ozone is our blanket, it's Earth's blanket. That is what is the largest part of the greenhouse effect. That's why stratosphere is so warm, warmer than the top of the troposphere. It's because of the greenhouse gases, the ozone that's up there. But that ozone also protects us from harmful UV rays, and that's what it was for. So this hole in the ozone, which was going to eventually expand across the globe, which fortunately it didn't really expand much further, that would have caused skin cancer rates to skyrocket because you would have had all these harmful UV rays penetrating through the ozone layer because the ozone layer wouldn't be thick enough to absorb these UV particles and reflect them back. No, no, no. It's too thin, so more and more of these UV particles are getting through the atmosphere and reaching us and touching us and penetrating through our skin and giving us cancer. I think they said it would have, by now, we probably would have had like 25 million more people a year dying of skin cancer. So it saved tens of millions of people's lives. So the Montreal Protocol was huge. And it also banned CFCs were also a huge greenhouse gas, much more potent than even methane. GWPs were often in the hundreds, so this was a huge success for the environment, for the world. Um, and also, great news is the hole in the ozone is expected to heal within the next 20 to 30 years. And it set an example of how every country is able to come together for a common cause and for the betterment of the environment and to stop everything. And to unite against a common environmental cause. We're hoping that this can be done with climate change today. The degrowth economy, some of you may or may not have heard of what degrowth is all about. Degrowth is a recent and growing proposal of how to end the climate crisis, along with many other issues impacting humanity. So, the idea is this: politicians campaign for and expect the economy to continue growing forever. Yeah, each generation will be better off than the previous one. I think I mentioned this before, right? With the discount rate that economists use, a similar idea. This has been correct for all of human history so far up to this point. But degrowth says that's a problem. Well, why is it a problem? Simple question, simple answer. It's because exponential growth cannot last forever, and that eventually there is no further room for growth. So there's a plateau. You plateau. Your growth cannot remain exponential forever. So eventually there will not be enough resources available for humanity to continue its growth at this rate. Um, and because of this, there ends up being a rapid economic decline. Food and water scarcity will occur, as well as a decline in human population. It will be devastating, and many places may fall into loss of government and may even fend for the limited resources that are left on the planet. So it's a very dire situation, right? And we already see this problem in some places, such as Africa, with starvation and lack of clean water. Prices of everyday items and housing will be through the roof, and we've already seen that now happen. And it will look a lot like a permanent Great Depression, as I put it. Scientists have done countless studies and have seen if in many organisms and noticed that after a certain threshold, the population of species began to decline. I think we said it in rabbits, mice, and it's because just a lack of room to grow, a lack of resources. You can't continue to grow forever. Eventually, there's a wall that you reach where you just can't have the resources to grow, and then you reach. I said anarchy, but really what it is survival of the fittest is kind of what it turns into, which is the Charles Darwin thing, right? The survival of the fittest argument on evolution. It's a similar idea as kind of what would occur in a exponentially growing population that just doesn't stop growing unless you do something to slow the growth of that economy and then reach a safe level. Let's reach a safe level to where you can safely stop growing and continue your prosperity until the end of time. Anyway, but this concern is the whole idea of degrowth. It's to combat that program and problem, sorry, not program, problem, and to, like I said, degrow, slow growth to a reasonable level so we don't face these hardships, these problems for the safety of humanity and everyone. And a big problem has to do with climate change, and it's a solution to climate change as well. So, as I said, the gradual slowdown to the economy, it argues that we don't need to have a million internet devices. That's a little bit of a stretch, but the point is we don't need the whole world to be powered by internet devices, sensors, all these gadgets. It also suggests controversially lower reproduction rates because, as I explained earlier, a massive and growing population can become out of control and become too much of a strain for the planet to handle, especially humans, very destructive species would be too much for the planet. This would also help out greatly when it comes to fighting climate change because less people, because less emissions. I can't remember, but it's a population. We called it the carbon intensity, energy intensity, and population were like the three contributors to climate change. Degrowth suggests that humans continue using Earth's resources at the same rate that Earth can replenish them. And I said, and this includes ending the production of non-renewable fuels to allow the Earth to replenish its resources, and this could take millions of years. So you can still use those non-renewable fuels, but only at the same rate it can replenish them. That's the whole idea of degrowth, is to use Earth's resources at the same rate that they can be replenished so that you never run out of them and you can safely alter the planet. That's the only way you can. And that's the argument of degrowth. If you want to learn more about degrowth, you can always go to this website. These articles, Degrowth Can Work, Here's How Science Can Help, at nature.com, and In Defense of Degrowth by hbr.org. There are other articles. I just saw one earlier today that you can look up. But yeah, it's very controversial and has many critics, especially economists, right? Because they're all about the economy and they're like, oh no, this is going to kill the economy. You're going to hurt the economy. It's going to be bad for families. That's their argument. Um, and I don't think it's bad for families as long as you make it equal and fair for all. Really, I think the plan of degrowth is going to hurt the rich more than anyone because the rich own all of this useless stuff like jets, private jets, and like expensive gas guzzling cars. They own, and they also contribute the most to climate change. But also, as you could naturally believe, a lot of Republicans don't agree with this. And as I said, many raise concerns about this solution, largely because of what I said about the population thing about lower reproductive rates, because of the population is just too high, I guess, to be sustainable on this planet. At least the way that we are, at least the way that we are living on it. The way we're living on it is not sustainable, especially for the population that currently lives on this earth. It's just not sustainable. So that's that argument. All right, now I'm going to tell you why you should invest in climate-friendly options. Why should I give up gas cars? Why should I not fly that plane? Why why should I care about the environment? Well, money has a lot to do with it. There's economics. I couldn't have said this 15 years ago, but what's fun is I can't say it now. It's the cool part. Is that climate friendly options are now economically friendly options. Let's look at that. Let's get our pointer. This will help us out. So, the first thing I want to look at is electric versus gas cars. Average price of an electric car. This Most of this data is taken from Motor.com that I did research on. So cost of so as we saw in previous slides, cost of electric batteries are continuing to decline, and so the average price of a electric car is only $53,000 on average. Average price of a gas car is $48,000, which is only a $5,000 difference according to Motor.com. Fuel cost is about $3.40 per gallon in the U.S., and assuming the average car has a fuel efficiency of about 25 miles per gallon, and the average person from that same site says that they drive 15,000 miles per year. So that is about 600 gallons of fuel. And 600 gallons of fuel at $300.40 is about $2,000 in fuel costs. Um, and the average electric car goes anywhere from 250 to 300 miles on a single charge. And even to this day, there's more advancements in that. Um, the average cost of filling up a car ranges between 600 and 1100. So there's a net positive of about $1,500 every year. 1,500 to $2,000, but we'll say about 1,500. So from fuel costs alone, it would only take 3 years. It'd take about 3 years, right? Because it's $5,000 difference. 1,500 times three, that's 4,500. Right around breaking even, maybe 3 years and 3 months. Or 45, 50, we'll call it 50,000 miles, 45,000 miles of driving. You'd break even on your estimate, on your investment. However, we did find that electric cars cost more to insure. However, there are also other positives for owning electric cars, such as you need oil changes, and you don't have to worry about your catalytic converter getting stolen because electric cars don't have catalytic converters because they don't have to convert NOx and stuff into. They don't they don't have smog problems with electric cars, so you don't have to worry about your catalytic converter getting stolen. We know that's a big issue. So essentially, if you drive after 50,000 miles, you're already making profit essentially off of your car, and it's getting cheaper. It's getting cheaper. It's also investments from the Inflation Reduction Act, as we saw. It's getting cheaper. There's incentives. I think now, especially with the growing amount of there's EV parking now for EVs, so that's another benefit of having an EV. There's more parking, EV chargers around the world, especially the U.S. So there's more charging, there's more parking. So I just see a lot of benefits in getting an EV. All right, so we have two more slides. The next one up is installing solar panels, right? So this is a big one that people can do at home. Um, so there's different kinds of solar panels, and this is the current price, and it's continuing to go down, and it's also um, the Inflation Reduction Act also gives incentives for buying solar panels. So I'm not going to go too far into the calculations and everything, but I kind of did them in this slide if you want to look at them. Essentially, it's going to cost $350 at 6 kilowatts daily usage per year. So, and solar panels last an average of 20 to 25 years. So, this means it only takes about 3 years of 8 hours per day electricity usage to break even on your investment. So, it only takes 3 years to break even. Although sometimes it takes more than that, 5, 10 years. Yeah, I think my professor said it took him 10 years. He also installed a cool roof. You can see the white thing over top of his roof with his solar panels. Right, this is my professor's house. Don't dox him. Well, I actually kind of am doxing him. This is his solar panels that power his home. And then this is his cool roof. And it took him, he said, 10 years to break even on this total purchase of the cool roof and the solar panels. And the cool roof keeps his inside house cool. So it's a good energy investment. It reduces your energy cost because this is a high albedo surface, as we talked about albedo earlier, and that causes more sunlight to be reflected, less of it to be absorbed and make its way transmitted into your room, into your house. So it causes it to be cooler during the summer. So, and you're still absorbing all that sunlight from the sun, and you're also keeping your house cooler. So this setup is very energy efficient, very smart. Um, my professor showing his brain power there in this design here. And look at these trees too. He's got a lot of trees around there as well around his house because trees are also known to cool your home if they're planted correctly. And they're also really good for the environment, right? They produce oxygen for us. They're really good sinks for greenhouse gases. They are Earth's natural sinks for greenhouse gases. And yeah, like I said, planting trees. It's right here as well. Cut the cost of your AC significantly, or just make it free if you have solar panels. You don't have to pay for AC. Wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to pay for electricity? Make this solar panel investment. If you put this solar panel on the cool roof, in 15 years, you'll be making money. Bang, you have free energy. Just this one time investment. It is hard though for younger people like me, so but if you're over 35, I should say, in this economy, you should definitely do this. Definitely, if you're like making good money, I highly recommend it. Um, there's also more on the EPA website about using trees um, to help make your house cooler. This is very good stuff. Both of these slides I highly recommend you guys take advantage of. Even with Trump as president, it should still the prices of this stuff should still go down and it should still be effective and desirable for the average consumer. Okay, so this is our last slide, reducing your carbon footprint. I want to say thank you for sticking around with me on this presentation. If you want to learn more, you can check out Andrew Dessler's textbook on climate change. It's called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's by Andrew Dessler on climate change. I think it came out in 2021 or 2022. It's a fairly new textbook. You can also check out and visit the IPCC, look at their latest report. If you'd like to learn more about reducing your carbon footprint, you can check out this site that I've linked here. I'm going to post these slides as a PDF in the link in the description of this YouTube video. So if you want to check this out, it'll be in the description. Alrighty. So this is a list I stole from my climate change class that I took a couple years ago. Actually, it was only 1 year ago, but it feels like it's been longer than that. Last year, my climate change class covered this stuff. So the top three things are reducing food waste, uh, distributing solar panels, and plant-rich diets. So, and LED lighting, wow, insulation, public transit. So there's a lot you can do to reduce your personal public footprint. and this is gonna be something that helps you out personally. But one thing I want my viewers to understand before I close this video, because that's the end, is that most climate change, anywhere between 80 and 90%, isn't caused by the average consumer, average human, average person. It's caused by the big corporations. They contribute a large portion of emissions. It's greenhouse gas emissions, especially the top 1%. The rich, the billionaires, they contribute a substantial portion of it. And we need systematic change because the things we buy and do are heavily impacted by the higher up. It's hard to make changes in your life, especially when it's the most economically feasible option with, the poor getting poorer and the rich getting richer. It's very hard for people these days. So I understand. And um, I think it is time we make those people in the corporations hold them responsible for the damage they have done and they will continue to do. That's why I like Bernie Sanders so much, because he is really against cracking down on the big business, big corporations and billionaires. But they're not just rich, they're not just annoying. They're also the largest contributors to the climate crisis. And I highly recommend you do these things too to help the planet and you. I guess it'll still make a change. Still gonna make a big change, but the biggest change you can do, really, is by going to your lawmakers, your local lawmakers, your mayors, your senators, and letting them know how you feel about this. Politics is powerful if done right. Very powerful.